Morning readers, it's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf and welcome to another Bookish Breakfast. Just noticed that the light is making one of my cheeks look really red and one of them look really white. This is quite an interesting effect. So I am not in a usual location at the moment. I'm in my bed because it is bedtime for me, even though it is in fact breakfast time, because I've just done one night shift and unusually for the times when I normally film these, I am on another night shift tonight, as in, yeah, that's about as much as I can possibly explain it. But I still wanted to do a little Thursday morning video because that's like the routine now, and I'm trying to stick very hard to the routine so that I don't, lose it all completely. So today I'm going to do a wrap up, and there's something about January months. There's something about January that I seem to end up doing a wrap up for January and no other month. But I think because I've been doing like other videos on other topics, I feel like I've not mentioned the things that I have been reading. Except I have. I don't know. And then I'm going to talk briefly about what I'm currently reading and plans for February. So, in my New Year's resolution video, I showed you my little goals notebook, and I showed you where I'm going to be writing in the books that I've read. So January, you can see, had this like really dense collection of books at the top half, and then nothing for the latter two. And I think it's slightly explained by the fact that this day was my lab test. So you've got like, this is all me procrastinating my revision, and then this is like suddenly having to do it for the next week because I had the exam coming on. That's not to say that I wasn't reading in that time, but I wasn't finishing books. So, what did I finish in January? The first book that I finished was Mortal Engines by Reeve. So this is I would say it's a YA, maybe middle grade fantasy, about basically cities that move and eat each other, and it's about somebody who is developing a super powerful weapon who is going to cause a lot of damage to this system, and a couple of people who are trying to work out like who are the goodies, who are the baddies, and whether to take down this or what this weapon is and whether to take it down or not. This was a reread for me. So when I was quite young, all of the rest of my family read it and loved it, and I really didn't particularly like it, and they all went to read the rest of the series, and I did not. Because I didn't like it. And this time around, Beau listened to it as an audiobook, and he enjoyed it and spoke highly of it. So highly maybe putting it strongly, but he enjoyed it. So I thought, I might as well reread it and see if I like it better now that I'm older, because I remember, I think my mum said, maybe you're a little bit too young for it. I would say that now I feel like I was much too old for it. So I think there's quite a narrow sweet spot for this book in terms of reading it as a young adult, although my parents read it as adults and enjoyed it. I felt like the writing was very simplistic, and it was just completely dependent on plot conveniences, and just like ships appearing out of nowhere exactly when they were needed and things like that. It wasn't as bad as, say, something like Children of Blood and Bone, but it was not a very good quality novel in terms of like the plot kind of holding itself together. So that was not a best book of the year, but it was the first book that I finished, so it was the best book at that point because there was nothing else to compare it to. Then the second book that I finished, I've just lost my page, was Twas the Nightshift Before Christmas. I wasn't really kind of meant to be reading this one, but I really enjoyed, as I've mentioned frequently, This Is Going to Hurt, and I bought this for myself because nobody got it for me for Christmas, and I think I've already mentioned I was completely surprised that nobody thought of this one for me, but I just bought it for myself, and I read it, and it took me like 2 hours, and it was good fun. It wasn't as good as his first book, but it was entertaining, and I liked the way that it was like one Christmas at a time. So he starts with this like jaunty new Christmas tie, and he wears the same Christmas tie every Christmas, and it kind of like comes up in anecdotes every time. It had a kind of like a cohesive theme through it. I would probably happily give this one away or lend this one out because I don't have any strong attachments to it, but I would be like, oh yeah, you should read it, kind of thing. Then the third book that I finished was Vita Nostra. I talked about this one at length previously, so I'm not going to go into it too much again, but this is a much more mature YA, sort of real world type fantasy, where the there's a very soft magic system, and it doesn't really feel like a magic system, but it's like a way of like intellectually developing your powers to transcend the normal world. It was fascinating. I found the ending perhaps not exactly disappointing, but the thing that it lacked was a major adversary. I can't remember if I've said this in a video before, but there was nothing that the characters were contending against other than the struggle of learning. And it tries to kind of set up this character of Farit Kushenikov as a baddie, and he is kind of like a baddie at the start of the book, but by the end of the book, he's kind of a goodie, which is interesting in itself. Yeah, and I would say I would recommend this to somebody who normally reads YA and would like to kind of push the boundaries of what they read and maybe challenge themselves a little bit, but stay within the realms of something that's broadly speaking familiar. The other thing that I would say is there is some romance in this, and the romance was, to me, quite weak. I thought the relationship worked a lot better as a friendship than it did as a romance, but that's my opinion. And I can't remember how much of that I've said previously in videos, so I'm sorry if I just repeat myself. The next book that I finished was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, which was another reread, and we've got a very heavy fantasy theme going on. So I read the whole series of Harry Potters aloud to Beau over the course of 2019, and then this one overlapped into 2020 because The Order of the Phoenix is so long and so bad. I would say this is one of the best books in the series, so I would recommend anyone who hasn't finished the series that it is kind of worth it. But I would say that by the end, there is just so much complexity and so many different themes, and you end up, like, I remember the first time I read it, feeling like the Deathly Hallows were like a complete curveball that just came out of nowhere, and it's like, oh, but we were on Horcruxes, and even the Horcruxes came out of nowhere, and now we're on Hallows, and oh my god, so many different things. Whereas now I really enjoy them, and I really enjoy all of those different aspects of the world that there are to kind of like think about and speculate about, and I'd say that's the strength that Harry Potter really has, is the fandom, and the multiple theories that people make and the connections and things. I really enjoy watching all of those videos where people like make wild, oh, this character did such and such kind of connection theories, because I do like the extended world that Harry Potter has, but the writing is just not very good, and there are just too many themes going on that by the end of it you can't really work out what the important themes are, and some of the themes that you think are really important sometimes get a bit confused and kind of incompleted or contradictory. So yeah, it's just a little bit not perfect. But the next books that we are reading aloud are The Hunger Games, and going straight from J.K. Rowling to Suzanne Collins, basically has just confirmed for me that these books are just much better. And they're much better written. I mean, the actual prose on the page, when you read like a paragraph of The Hunger Games, it reads like crap. Like, it reads like really, really bad writing. But the effect that it has is really, really good. And they both have the same thing where if you read them a couple of times, you see like a character's name or something and think, oh, I didn't get that was a reference before. But actually that's like that means something. So they both have that little like secret unlocking thing, but the pacing is just so much better in these books. I think the characterization is better too, and I just care a lot more. I mean, obviously they're very, very different, but in terms of recent young adult books that have been adapted into film and caused like a major kind of fan base thing, The Hunger Games is actually a really, really good series, whereas Harry Potter has just happened to get a lot of attention. So, anyway, that's what we're reading at the moment. I should imagine we will finish that by the end of February. The first book, that is, not all three. Then the next book I finished in January was Henry VIII, The Quest for Fame by John Guy, and this was another non-fiction book, so we're all either non-fiction or fantasy, and I was sitting in the library doing some revision, and then I was thinking about Thomas Cromwell, and so I went to see if there was a biography of Thomas Cromwell, and there wasn't, but there was a little mini biography of Henry VIII, and I think I showed this on one of my Cromwellathon videos, but basically this was just a really succinct biography, and because it was so succinct, it was quite lacking, so the author is trying to make an argument that Henry VIII was obsessed with this kind of quest for fame, as he says in the title, and that the important thing to him was to be like an important political figure, not necessarily successful in battle, but just like well recognised and well respected. But because it was such a short book, they just didn't really... they weren't able to pull that narrative together well enough, and in the end I was just left thinking that they were just trying to tell a straightforward biography, and then somebody said, oh, but you've got to have an angle, so they just like shoehorned an angle onto it by saying, oh, Henry VIII wanted to be famous, and you know, he succeeded. Of all of the monarchs of England, he's the one that most English school kids could probably say something about, which is that he had 6 wives, so you know, achievements. But yeah, I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed getting the context for Wolf Hall. Then the next book that I finished was Agamemnon by Aeschylus, some ancient Greek name, basically. And this is going to be part of a discussing drama series that I'm going to do with Roz at Scally Dandling about the book. So I'm not going to tell you too much about that because we are planning to discuss it together next week, when Roz is just... spoilers for next week, or I should maybe call it like a trailer for next week. Roz is coming to visit, and we are going to film some videos together, so you have that to look forward to. Maybe next Thursday will be slightly more coherent and slightly more interesting because there will be a Roz involved. So we're going to talk about Agamemnon there, and I read it on the Kindle, which is not my favourite reading format, but it does mean that I can read things that I wouldn't otherwise be able to read. What else have I been reading lately? So I've also read some articles. So at the end of last year, I made a commitment that I was going to read an article every week, and I have actually embedded that into my New Year's resolutions. So far this year, I have read... they're not really worth discussing because they're mostly like more kind of less interesting, I guess, than the ones that I read at the end of last year. But I read articles on techniques in cannulation and suturing, not really something that's ripe for discussion. Then some interesting articles on assessing eye health in the community, so like really like basic level assessments for people who are not eye health specialists, in the Journal of Community Eye Health, and that's open access. So if you literally search the Journal of Community Eye Health, if for some reason you want to know how to assess eye health in a low resource setting, that most recent issue of the journal is all dedicated to low resource eye assessment, and you can just like download it and read it all for free. So yeah, that's an option. And then I read an article, like partially articles on rhabdomyolysis and pancreatitis, where I didn't read like every single detail because that was related to some patient cases that I was trying to just like get some more background information for, so I didn't like comb through them in great detail, but I did enjoy just getting a bit more background. And then I read, just to be topical, last week an article published in The Lancet about coronavirus, which was I think it was based on the first 40 cases that came to particular attention in the hospital in Wuhan, and it looked at things like the pattern of inflammatory markers that people who got to different levels of illness. So they found that more ill people had different inflammatory markers, which was quite interesting, and looked at like people's comorbidities and so on, just in that very, very small early group. And what I found fascinating about this is that that is gathering data from the first 2 weeks of January and publishing like in the 3rd or 4th week of January. Like, it's so up to date, and it has to be in a situation like this where it's developing so quickly. The people who are treating those poorly cases need to know what we know so far about it, and in the article it compared those inflammatory markers to ones that were seen in SARS and MERS, so similar coronaviruses, and kind of like tried to draw a pattern from them. So that's really vital when responding to a threat like this, is getting the information that you need as quickly as possible. So I'm going to look and see if I can read another coronavirus article this month as well, this week as well, just to kind of like try and keep on top of the news stories, just instead of not just from the perspective of the newspaper reporting of, you know, people stuck on cruise ships and whatever, but more from the like epidemiological side of things. So yes, that's my plan. Currently reading, I am currently reading Moving Mountains by Claire Bertshinger. She was the director of the course that I just finished, and I had this book out from the library and I didn't manage to finish it, so I just ordered it for myself cheekily from Amazon, which I don't generally like to do so much these days because I'd rather find them in a secondhand bookshop, but this is realistically not going to be a book that I would just find. It's interesting. I'll talk when I finished it rather than constantly throughout. Then I am also, my next audiobook is Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere, so this is an urban fantasy. I was really enjoying it as a book. I don't know whether Neil Gaiman is American. I'm going to say that he is, because I just, like, in the last bit that I listened to, encountered this really, I'm going to say anachronistic, but that's not right, because it's not the wrong time, it's the wrong place, but a reference to a cellular phone in London, which is just weird, but it's good. I like the premise so far, and it's got really exciting moments, but I'm listening to it as an audiobook when I'm walking along, so I'm maybe not getting everything out of it, but I love the cover on this. It's like it's a little rat. And then the other thing is, of course, for Sagalong, I've started the Laxdaela saga. Unfortunately, I am partway through chapter 7, so I'm here. And I need to get all the way to chapter 40. To here. By Saturday. And I don't know if that's realistically going to happen, because I am working nights until then. And the thing about sagas is they're not entirely easily digestible. I need digestible stuff when I'm on night shifts. The other thing that I've just finished, that it's a book that I finished in February, is Egil Saga, because I wanted to like get into the saga reading, and I think somebody else is doing that, and I can't remember who. I'm really sorry, but I'm going to weigh in with my thoughts on their videos, as opposed to, you know, talking about it here. But yes, please join us for Sagalong, because it's going to be great. I promise. When I finish reading it, I will try and have something interesting to say. Then the other thing is, February is Black History Month, and Roz and I have decided that for our next discussing drama, we're going to choose something by a black playwright, just to kind of like fit in slightly to Black History Month. The thing is with BookTube is you can't do every event, like you just can't, and it's about which things you choose to prioritize. So I think I mentioned in my last video that I'm not going to prioritize Bring Up the Bodies because I don't physically have it. I'm not going to do one of the, like, I know some people are only reading black writers for February, and I fully like admire that, but I also wanted to do Sagalong, and I also wanted to like read other stuff, and I also just don't like my reading being fully restricted. So I'm just gonna try and like mix it in a little bit, and one of the ways I wanted to do that was on Serial Reader. So I just finished Egil's Saga, that was on Serial Reader, which is a good tip if you are looking for a place to get hold of it. It's just a smartphone app where it basically sends you like an issue every day. So my choices, Serial Reader has put forward a list of suggestions for Black History Month, and my choices are, and I really don't know what to choose, so I'm actually asking for advice here. So if you have read any of these, please tell me what is interesting. Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass by Frederick Douglass, and that is 14 issues, and that's an autobiography. The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois, that is 27 issues, and that is, I think it's essays, so it's slightly different. 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup. I know that's been made into a film, but it is 30 issues, and the thing that I found with Serial Reader is I need them to be really short, and I need them ideally to be really, really gripping as well, because the whole point of the app for me is it's easier to pick up your phone sometimes than it is to pick up a book, particularly if you're like on a bus or something, but it's not easier to pick up your phone and read something that's really dense and boring, because you can just open like a news app or something, and not have to kind of like, when you're in a post night shift lazy mood, you like, I just don't want something that's too hard going. So yeah, I want to pick something that's going to be fun and exciting and interesting. Then the next one is Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington, that's 26 issues. The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Ouladah Equinou, that's 25 issues. I'm quite interested in this one because this one was mentioned in our classes on ending slavery in like year 9 or something. It's interesting how we had lessons on how the British abolished slavery and no lessons really on how the British helped to set up the slave trade. But yeah, it was mentioned as being something that like changed the tide of public opinion. This text about Ouladah Equianou's experience of the slave trade. So I'm interested in it, but it's 25 issues long. And it was written in the 1780s or something, so it's not going to be a light read. It's definitely not going to be an easy read. Then there is a novel called Clotel or the President's Daughter by William Wells Brown. That's 20 issues. That's a strong contender because it's a novel, but it was written in like the 1820s, so I don't know how... it said it was fast-paced in the little description, but who knows? Have you read it? If you have, please tell me, is it actually fast-paced? Then there is one that is so short that it's practically cheating, which is Southern Horrors by Ida B. Wells. And I believe that is a history of lynching, which sounds like it would be quite upsetting, but also quite interesting. That's only 4 issues, so I might do that. Whatever else I do, I might as well kind of do that as well. And then there is Caine by Jane Toomer, and I'm not entirely sure whether that is fiction or non-fiction, but it sounds like it's quite episodic, and that is 17 issues. So if you've read any of those, please let me know what you recommend for me to try that I will be able to enjoy. As well, because I want to enjoy the things that I'm reading. And I enjoyed Egil's Saga, but the saga format wasn't great for serial reader. Like, my best thing on serial reader is Sherlock Holmes, because they're normally quite short and they're quite gripping, and you always want to get to the next issue because you always want the resolution to the mystery. Yeah, so. Then, other things in terms of January, had my, like, New Year's resolution video, and one of the things that I mentioned was that I wanted to henna all of my hair, which I did yesterday, and literally you can't see it at all. So in the light it looks really greasy, but I did wash it last night after hennaing it. So the ends have now been hennaed twice, and you can just about see it. And the top has been hennaed once, and you can't see it at all. It was completely pointless. It was a waste of 4 hours. But yeah. So I've done that thing, and I also mentioned that I wanted to like be more accepting of buying things that were like fun and interesting, particularly like interesting, nice clothes. And this, let's see if I can find a way that I can show you. I walked past this in the window of a charity shop on Saturday, and yeah, now I own it. It's got cats on it. This is what I'm trying to show you. On the bottom as well. Actually, my future mother-in-law bought it for me, which I didn't mean for her to do. But people just do that sometimes, when they're like, I'm going to guilt trip you into letting me buy this for you. And I don't really understand it, because there is no positive feelings from that. Like, I just don't get it. Anyway, but it was very, very kind of her. It was meant kindly. It was just also kind of like, yeah. Anyway. So, have a lovely week, and have a lovely day. I will hopefully be asleep, and I will speak to you soon. I know I'm falling a little bit behind on replying to comments, but I will reply to them, so please still comment, please. Speak to you soon. Bye.